It's time for Truth, a ministry of Truth Family Bible Church in Middleton, Idaho. It's Time for Truth exists to glorify God through the edification of his saints in our local church and for the benefit of the church around the world. I'm your host, Pastor Danny Steinmeier. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We're grateful that you have joined us once again, wherever you may be, whenever you may be listening. Appreciate allowing us to enter your home or your car or wherever you may be listening. We appreciate that opportunity. And it's another opportunity today to have one we haven't done for a while. We haven't done a local church interview. We've enjoyed doing that in the past with various folks at Truth Family Bible Church, and we decided to do something along those same lines with Stone Mountain Baptist. So we have Pastor Gabe, and we also have one of the members, one of the founding members of Stone Mountain Baptist.
He's been there longer than me.
Yeah. Aaron Daggs. And so really grateful to have you in the studio with me, and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we wanted to do an interview, and one of the reasons why we like doing this is because, look, a lot of things in our world, a lot of even the podcast media world, it's about name recognition. It's about finding newsmakers and famous people, and someone in the news, perhaps. But we really thought that this is a local church podcast, and we really started this a long time ago. It's an opportunity for us to actually get to know regular, everyday Christians who are in our churches. One, it allows our church family and the Stone Mountain Church family as well to get to know people within our churches, to actually hear their story, hear their testimony, learn more about them, which hopefully stimulates you to want to get to know them more, that it encourages you to have them over, to ask them more questions, to find perhaps things in common that you didn't know you had in common. All kinds of opportunities. And it's a way for us also to just be grateful and thank the Lord for those who he is working through. It's not just those who are who have a big name and a big platform or anything like that, but this is an opportunity to recognize that God is building his church, and that the local church is filled with godly people who are loving their families and working hard and seeking to honor the Lord where they're at. And they have their own stories, and they have their own ways that the Lord has brought them to where they are today. And I think those things are an encouragement to us. Those things are opportunities for us to worship God and be thankful, but also to, again, take that opportunity to get to know people like this.
Yeah, and largely speaking, within the Christian blogosphere, I mean, people come and go, pastors rise and fall, people say stupid things. It's not that those ministries aren't useful. God has used a lot of large platforms for a lot of good over the years. People like Sproul and MacArthur, et cetera. But I'm really a huge proponent of just recognizing that localism is really what makes the church thrive, and that the normative means by which God builds the kingdom is through just the everyday Joes, the pastors you've never heard of, the churchmen you've never heard of, that are just faithful churchgoers year after year, building and doing what God has called them to do in their local town. And so I like focusing on learning about what just the men in our church do. I really enjoyed the episode you did with the Fiorellis a while back, enjoying just listening to what they're doing and trying to take dominion even in their own household and their business enterprises. So, the church is built on the backs of just simple, faithful men. And so it's a good opportunity for us just to get to know one another and recognize that we have missions everywhere we're planted. Every church is a stake in God's mission. And so we have great opportunities to build up the local body and encourage men, average men. I mean, you and I are average men, right? I mean, we're no one in particular. So it's a great opportunity just to encourage men to be involved and to know that what you're doing matters. Whether you're a roofing sales guy or you're a pastor or whatever it is you do for your vocation, all of us are called to live faithful lives before God. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to just do normal things like that and build that up.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to our conversation with Aaron today. Aaron Daggs, we want to hear a little bit more about your background and your testimony of coming to faith, and then we'll get into kind of how you've been led to Idaho, or maybe back to Idaho, and then just hear more about your story. So would you start off Where did you grow up, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for having me on. In a lot of ways, I'm just a normal guy, right? I grew up in Central California on a farm down there on a vineyard, not a winery or anything fancy like that. We grew raisins, right? Nature's candy. You'll never find a craisin in my household ever. I've been taught against those. A strong prejudice.
This is how I test Central California.
Yeah.
Do you say almond or almond?
Almond.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
old enough to. I'm not old enough. So my grandpa says almond.
Okay,
I
there
don't
we
say
go.
almond. You have to be a certain age to do that.
My father-in-law insists it's almond. Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I grew up out there, Christian family. We went. Grew up going to a Methodist church for a long time. That's where my grandmother went. Kind of going in there off and on. My growing up. My whole life. But then spent. My schooling was at actually a Mennonite school from first grade all the way through 11th grade. So Calvin, we ridiculed Calvin heavily at a Mennonite school. I remember learning about Calvinism in my freshman year, and it was like
It's
predestination.
the devil, right?
Have you ever
Yeah.
heard of this? This is crazy. Grew up with that. Good family. My dad farmed and worked at Cummins Diesel as a tech and a foreman. So hardworking guy, just one of the hardest working men I've ever met. Every day was work, work 40 to 60 hours a week, take me to full practice, coach my football team, and then come home and ride in the tractor till midnight, doing everything for that. So, really strong in that. Not a lot of theological talks, but, a lot of times between a father and son, it's not always those talks came few and far between, but they meant a lot, his love language was work, and it still is, right? It's working. So anyway, grew up in that. I don't want to call it a sheltered life, but it was, it wasn't your California public school experience. It wasn't. It was just very clean cut kids. Grew up with. So kind of went through that. And then my senior year, I transferred to a Dutch Reform school. And obviously at a Dutch Reform school, Calvin is a good name to listen to
Yeah, sure.
and to read. So
And you became a fan of R. Scott Clark.
yeah, didn't hear of him till college. But anyway, spent a year there. Had a good friend of mine named Isaiah. Barely talked to him in school, but we were both going to San Diego State, and so I caught him in the hallway one day and said, "Hey, let's room together." That turned out to be a very fateful and providential decision, which things, looking in hindsight, typically are. He had a friend who was going to the Response down there. Joel Webben was pastoring at the time, and kind of he went right away. Of course, my freshman and sophomore year made all the college mistakes you can make, but in God's providence, having guys like him, other guys that are currently at our church now, kind of called me out of that, and kind of my sophomore year was kind of brought to the faith, if you will. Right, I wasn't baptized at all growing up, so it was very much, just hanging out with the guys. Which was something that I wasn't used to at church. Church was grandma was in the choir, and you sit and you're there for Christmas.
Formal.
But and so a lot of those conversations, a lot of hard conversations, all that, and then I think it was my sophomore year, I was baptized, and lived with those guys for 4 years. And that was a great time. Grew in my faith tremendously. And then my senior year, so I was always going back to Idaho, kind of bringing it around to Idaho.
What's the connection to Idaho? Because you grew up in the Central Valley of California.
Yeah, so my grandmother's from Idaho. And so that was kind of my connection. We were, growing up as a kid, we'd spend summers up here. We spent, I think, 3 summers I spent up here. And reason for that is so my tons of cousins, and my grandmother's family. So the Blackstock Ranch still exists.
Mary Blackstock?
Yeah.
Who's that? Who's she to you?
She would be my cousin. So we share.
So Mary passed away a couple years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Right. So okay, and
Yeah.
so, but she was your
connection.
cousin, so she's
Yeah.
older, right?
Yeah,
She's
so
older.
she should be. So my grandmother's brother's grandson. No. Okay, how do I? I'm trying to think of this. So it's Ted is her. So I think she. So it's my mom's cousin, and then my second cousin.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
think.
All right, gotcha.
Either way, I just think of her. As
You
my
know
cousin.
the name clearly.
Yeah.
Well, so we were involved. Our family is involved in local 4-H. We live in Marsing, obviously,
there you
and so
Your
Mary Black-
neighbors, you just didn't know.
Well,
it.
yeah, Mary Blackstock was heavily involved in the local
Oh, yeah.
4-H stuff, and she was especially involved in the cattle portion of 4-H, and so we definitely when we were part of Wilson Butte 4-H club, and so I think she had a connection to that. That's closer to where their ranch was. So
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
No,
there,
no worries, but,
all of a sudden I heard Blackstock, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
a name
There
that I
you go.
know.
Yeah, so my grandmother is a Blackstock.
Okay.
And so growing up, Blackstock Ranch, it's one of the oldest ranches in Idaho. Idaho's not that old, but 1901, still there, mostly intact. My cousins run it now, Mary, and her Ted, her husband, and her kids are kind of taking it over now. And so was always kind of the draw, right? So, Idaho growing up was like, almost like a mythical place, right? It's, if people
That mythical far-off place, Idaho.
Yeah, but it's, you come here, it's just sagebrush and,
Beautiful sage.
and really because of the ranch, right? It was like this connection that we had. It's not necessarily, it's kind of a West Coast American thing, right? Where it's all very new, right? But this kind of grounding that the Blackstock Ranch gave us was like, oh, this is like, it's like our place.
Yeah, you had heritage
Yeah.
there, whereas most of California, it's like, okay, it's only been here for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so, anyway, so that was, for whatever reason, right, it had built up in our minds enough that, hey, that was going to be the place that we all moved to when we're done with school. And it happened that way. My dad, when I graduated school, then my little sister graduated school, he sold the ranch there and bought a ranch up here. And we're all up here except for now. My sister lives in Iowa. She married an Iowa farmer, so she's out in the Midwest doing her thing out there. But we all ended up here. Obviously California is California the way it is now, but honestly, a lot of it's a similar area to here. I guess put it farming wise, very conservative. But for me, it was. I always go back to the history. The ranch. Any school project I could do. It was Idaho. I remember each kid had to have, I can't remember what grade it was in, but each kid had to pick a state to do a presentation on. I missed that day, and so I didn't get to pick Idaho. The kid who picked Idaho couldn't care less about Idaho. So, and I was like, hey, dude, I will do anything. Because
Trade me.
because my grandfather, so my great grandfather was a state senator. So you could pick someone. So I got to you had to pick a person. To talk about a famous person, so I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do my great grandpa." He was a state senator, so
Very cool. Yeah.
so that was kind of the connection to Idaho, right? I've been going up here my whole life, and just going to the ranch was almost like, it was like a pilgrimage. It just is kind of like that's why I kind of use the word mythical, because for a lot of my family, you go. I know so many cousins on that side, second, third. We're trying to figure out what cousin Mary is.
Right.
I don't know. I know so many people because of that ranch, right? So anyway, that was kind of my plan. And then, I graduate 2020. We have the chaos in San Diego and everywhere.
And what was your degree in?
My degree was in marketing and sales management, so business administration. Typical business degree. I actually am using it, so
Yeah, there you go.
that is nice.
Charlie Kirk would be proud.
Yeah. So I had a lot of friends. A pretty tight group down in San Diego. Pastor Sean we had a Bible study and just a pretty tight group. Really conservative young guys.
They were known as the conservative contingency within the response church.
Whether we liked it or not,
It was the head covering, psalm singing, King James reading weirdos, right?
Yeah.
Let's just be transparent here, Daggs.
So yeah, that was us, and so there was kind of the point like, hey, we don't want to stick around here. And I was like, well, I'm going to Idaho. I've always been going up there. And so it turned out, all those guys moved up. We planted a church in 21. So we're almost 5 years in now.
Yep. April will be 5-year anniversary.
Yep. And if, everybody here has planted a church. So you guys know that church plant never is what you think it's going to be 5 years later. So a lot of things have happened, so you mentioned I was a founding member. There's 2 founding members left. Gabe came on and 2 years later, 23?
Yeah, January 23. Yep.
And that was kind of, and so here we are, by God's grace, we're still kicking. It's a, great little church. And yeah, so in a lot of ways, it's my fault. Everyone's up here.
And they're all thanking him now, right? Even the ones that are at other churches now are still, owe their thanks to being in the profitable and glorious state of Idaho.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Idaho. It's like I'm kind of mentioned, right? It's it's a new place, and I think in a lot of ways, it makes it difficult for people, even people they move up. In a lot of ways, Idaho is still, finding itself. It's finding its culture. You go to, I think that's a real struggle right now in Idaho. We're so new. We're so we were settled, right? So my great grandfather came to Idaho in 1889. It wasn't even a state yet, right? Yeah. That wasn't that long ago.
It really wasn't that long ago.
That's
Europeans are like, I have a house that's older than that.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's very old, and at that time, right, and Idaho, for a lot of its history, has been just where people hide from the federal government. Honestly, right?
Sounds like a great place.
We have a ton of, pretty much every flavor of cult you can think of, Christian cult has existed here, and there's a large number of them. And so I think, it in that way makes it, I think, Utah is in a similar situation. I think Brian Sauvé has even mentioned like the difficulty of planting a church in Mormonville, essentially, right? There's a lot of Mormons here, a lot of Latter-day Saints.
Well, I think you're highlighting there something about we've talked about it among the elders of our church too, and we're challenged with a number of different ways. One, we're Protestants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
2, we're Americans.
Yep.
3, we're Idahoans. Which there's a fierce independence, and I'm going to do my own thing, and no one's going to tell me what to do, or I'm not going.
An Anabaptist spirit.
Yeah. So dealing with other people, organization, submission, those types of things can be hard things for this part of the country that is, just finding itself and doing their own thing. Like you said, all the different cults. When you think about it, it's like, okay, there's something to that, right? And
there actually are a lot.
And all what so we've got a lot of connection with the followers, with the ex-followers, but what really characterizes them also is they're very factious as well in their religion. They're always splitting and separating from each other, and suspicious of authority and teachers and stuff like that. So it's a very interesting dynamic that you really bring up, the newness of Idaho, the young character and nature of it. We don't really give that enough credit, I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, there's still almost like a bit of an untamed wilderness when it comes. I mean, like obviously we have the legitimate wilderness of the Sawtooths and the Frank Church, wilderness area. Like Idaho is obviously a very mountainous and robust, area. But even just culturally, I think you hit a really important thing is that Idaho, people think of Mormons and potatoes, like that's all we got, know, and that's kind of sad because after living here now for goodness, almost 20 years, I mean, our state has so much to offer, such a rich heritage, the amount of history and interesting things that have happened here, the fact that we are still sort of the pioneer West, like Idaho has the Mountain West, Idaho, Utah, has a very distinct flavor. Even if you take Mormons out of the equation, it's a very distinct flavor compared to the Pacific Northwest. Like the Cascade sort of vibe versus the Rocky and Sawtooths, Tetons, very different feel. And so when you look at that sort of staunch independence, not being on the coast, not being, part of like the ocean trade and some of that we're actually really just in a rugged wilderness where people have had to work to provide irrigation, even just to be able to eat and live and thrive. I mean, the fact that we do live amongst a place that is full of sagebrush, and yet, one of my favorite views is coming over the hill and just seeing the patchwork quilt of all the farmland before me when I drop off at just about any mountain in this area. Like that is built on the backs of men like your great grandfather, So it's really a fascinating thing that I think the challenge for us now is to see how do we submit that to Christ and really take ownership back from the Mormon Church. That actually is that's actually what brought me to Idaho. Ironically, was that I wanted to do the whole apologetics things with Mormons, and I had so many Mormon friends growing up. I'm like, I might as well go to where they're
there's
super
a lot of them,
populated.
Yeah.
But that's a unique challenge that we have.
Yeah.
So before you, we'll get back to you coming to Idaho. So tell us a little bit more about you're married. Tell me about that. Tell us about that meeting your wife and when that happened. And
You guys got married in 2020, right?
Yes.
We're right on it.
Yeah.
But that was fun in California.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've been very blessed. So I met my wife November, or I guess October 2019. And, it was at, when you're a bunch of young guys at a church like that, a lot of the, young women just get swooped up, it's not a very big church, and I had a friend of mine was like, hey, there's this, girl named Aubrey. And I was like, well, which one is she? There's like 4 of them. And, she was the type that end of church, she's gone, so it's hard to catch her. So a lot of goading and guys getting me, hyped up to ask her out. One day I'll never forget it. It was like, I was talking to some guy and I chickened out the day before the week before asking her out. And I just came around and I was mid conversation. I was like, hold on, as I knew I just had to run and catch her. So I came around. I knew I was at one end of the auditorium. It was an auditorium, kind of like you guys are at. And I knew she'd be coming around the second door, so I just booked it. I just stopped her. I knew she had grown up somewhat close to me in the Central Valley. It was a lot farther than I thought. So when I said, oh, have you heard of, it was Madera, I thought would be a place that she would know. She was like, never heard of it. And I was like,
Good start.
Cool, that was my only icebreaker. So do you want to go on a date with me? So just asked her out. It was the first time I talked to her. We went on a date the next week, and it was, I had a lot of guys around me. I think, obviously, growing up, you date girls, and if you don't have any guidance, you just date them, and no direction. Yeah. This was, was dating her, and I had a lot of guys in my corner, just, counseling me, what to do. In that sense, like what does a good courtship look like? And so the best thing is to just keep it really short, actually, is the best advice. But yeah, so we dated.
Believe we've said similar things.
Yeah. And so we courted for, well, shoot, I think we dated for a whole 4 or 5 months. I was, her parents, she grew up Dutch Reformed, so she grew up in that whole space. So her parents were conservative and were very kind to me. The second time I met her dad, I was asking, for her hand in marriage, and he was very, very kind to me. Because I think of it now as a dad, and I'm like, wow, that was kind of a lot to do. At the time, it was like,
you're like, why on earth did he say yes?
Yeah. So very, very, great people. And so we got married. Well, luckily, so she went to PLNU, and their school was still shut down in 20.
She went to Point Loma.
Point Loma.
Point Loma.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Point Loma. Sea lions, but it's not a lion. Or it is a lion, not like an actual sea lion. It's If anybody knows, it's a weird mascot.
Like it's a lion in the sea.
Yeah,
instead of a sea lion.
Instead of a sea lion. Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, it's better than the Blackhawks or whatever
yeah.
NBA is now. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, and so she was gonna had 1 semester left. Well, everything was going to be from home. So I was like, well, we can, we were going to get married at 21. But, I had 2 of my friends, they were both getting married in 2020. I was like, it'd be cool if we all got married in the same year. So it worked out because her school was canceled. So, we got married.
A lot of backyard weddings.
Yeah. It was just in a backyard in Ripon, California. Extremely hot. That's probably what people remember the most about that wedding. And it's been great. I got her to move up to Idaho, And yeah, so we've had 3 kids since then. We lived in Coeur d'Alene for about a year, but was able to come back down here and find a job and plant the church in April 21. It was April 21, right?
That sounds
Yeah,
right.
that sounds right. Yeah, because
Yep.
26,
Should be 5
years.
this
Yeah.
year. Yep.
Sounds right. I think I met Sean. He was passing out tracts down at the airport
Yeah.
when somebody was coming to. Some important figure flew in.
That
flew
sounds like
in.
something
Was it
Sean would
Biden? I think it was when Biden came in for a day. Didn't he come in for a day? And
And would that be 21? Anyway, it could have been.
Yeah, I met
I forget what it was.
Sean
Yeah.
at Grace Agenda in 2021. That August is when I met them. So they had only been here a few months at the time.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. So you got married and moved straight to Coeur d'Alene then.
yeah, so I
So you said, well, I'm going to Idaho. Everybody else came down here, but you.
no, so
how's that
so
go?
when I left, the church plant was still like up in the air. It was like we didn't know if it was going to happen or not. But I, luckily I was in the middle of job interviews in March 2020. I graduated in May 2020.
Okay.
And it was for a power tool company. I was, and I told them, hey, I want to live in Idaho. And they said, well, the only thing we have in Idaho is in Coeur d'Alene. So I was like, well, close enough. We'll do that for now. And so when I left in May, it was still kind of up in the air if it was going to happen or not.
Okay.
So, and so I actually came down, found a job. It worked out perfectly. It was literally the week, I'd been looking for like 6 months for a job down in the Treasure Valley. And like I got a job and I was able to move the same week as everybody else did. So in April. So that worked out perfectly. So that was how, we made our way back down here. And then we've had, we realized this every odd year. So 21, 23, and 25. We've had, 3 kids at this point. So 2 boys and a girl. Been really blessed by that. And
And so how many families moved up from Southern California?
I think how many was it? So it had to be like 5.
I think 5 initially, and then
5.
2 or 3 others came. We kind of had like a new family every 6 months for a
Yeah.
couple of years. And then it's kind of ebbed and flowed
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, and I think 3 of us still live in the valley, and then 2 of us still go to the Stone Mountain Church. So, or 3.
And Isaiah, you're dead too.
Yeah. So they, you lose a couple to the Pado Baptist, but
We lost
Yeah.
a couple of members to the CREC. Not that we fault them for
Yeah.
choosing poorly.
but yeah, so that was that's kind of the story. Getting, it was, hindsight, it was like a movie. It was all pretty fast.
Yeah.
Courting, getting married, moving up, starting a church, and I will say, planning a church, I naively thought it would be a lot easier than it was. It's been really, an uplifting thing, honestly, looking back on everything and the good times and the bad. Because, when you're planning a church, one family leaves and it's like, okay, there goes 20% of your church.
Yeah.
and my pastor up in Coeur d'Alene, when I told him I was planning a church, he told me the same thing. He's like, you got to stick in it. Because he planted that church up there and he was like, it's going to be brutal. And at the time I was like, come on, dude. Planning a church.
How hard could it be?
How could it be? I'm just a 23-year-old.
Danny's over here. He's like,
Yeah.
I feel you, brother.
Yeah. I'm just a 23-year-old dude. I just graduated college. Like, married. This is going to be cake. No, definitely not. But it's been great. And I think it goes into kind of that heritage thing we were talking about earlier. That's the way I really see, our church. And, up until you guys, I don't know if any other really Reformed Baptist churches that were in the Treasure Valley, right? And so it was really a need.
Well, and when were you were planted just a little bit before us, I think, right? How old is your church now?
So we started. I believe it was December of 2018.
Okay.
So we were getting a little started before that.
So you
yeah.
preceded us, technically.
Yeah, just a brief, real Cliff Notes thing there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got we started on Sunday nights, and we were a Bible study that already was existing, and then we went to Sunday nights, and I started preaching at that point, and I was thinking, hey, if this is going to be a church, it's probably helpful if people know what the preaching would be like, as opposed to a Bible study. A Bible study and preaching are not the same thing. And so I had a full-time job, and so we were just doing that to get going. And then so we did that for 2.5 years approximately, and then we're able to take the leap with help from our sending church financially, and then was able to quit my job and go full time. So, so it took
Did
a
you
little
guys
bit.
start off? We're interviewing him,
Yeah.
but I'm interviewing you now for a second. Did you guys actually start off with like 1689 distinctives, or did you adopt that along the way? Because I know you guys have been sort of like finding your footing on exactly where you land on some of that stuff as a church polity.
No, we had the 16. So the way we did it is we had our we have a statement of faith that we didn't start
For
from
members.
scratch.
Yeah.
We didn't start from scratch. Like we were looked around, found a good one, modified it, and then we because there's certain things in there that we wanted. We wanted things on marriage, for instance, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For the times that are appropriate. And then we also had we wrote church distinctives, and then we also had the 1689 because we wanted a historical rooted, grounded confession. So that's we always had that, but that wasn't. It wasn't something that we led with at our sending church, for instance. So anyway,
Sure.
that's kind of where we were with that.
Covenantalism versus dispensationalism. That's always a bridge to gap for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, we weren't trying to be covenantal. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
it was just a matter of of knowing that this is a historic Baptist confession that ties us to the historic church. One of the things that I was a value that I came away with from my in-laws' church, which is a United Reformed Church, Dutch Reformed Church, and I really liked what this pastor said. We attended there when we first moved here with my in-laws, and he said we don't pretend we're the first people to read our Bibles.
Yeah.
And there's too much of that, and there's too much of that in the independent church movement, and so I especially when we are independent, I think it's valuable and important to be rooted and grounded in history, to saints and old theology that has stood the test of time, and that was really the rooting, the purpose for getting rooted and grounded in the past and in history, in church history. So.
Yeah. But to your point, Daggs, there really still aren't a lot of Reformed Baptist churches in the area. It's kind of a growing thing. So I'm going to ask you a question on that point. I'm your pastor now. Obviously, I've been a pastor there for almost 3 years. What would you say was the identity at the founding of Stone Mountain Baptist? Like, what was it? Because obviously we've preached through this past year about our distinctives, and our distinctives haven't evolved, right? They're the same. I adopted the distinctives that were already there, that was set forth by you and other men at that church. But if you were to sum up, like, what was the identity at the founding of Stone Mountain Baptist? Like, what was it that you think really was the identity of our church in its founding? And hopefully we've maintained it, but I'd be curious to hear your answer on that.
Yeah, I think our, there's no doubt. I mean, the guys who started it, I think we had one guy over 30, right?
Yeah.
We were really, really young guys.
I am the old man at the church.
that's
It's
really
true.
right.
Yeah. So we were really young guys, and I think, the culture was, obviously we were Reformed Baptists and we were conservative, and I think it's a lot, with the young right now, right? It's right. We had a real hunger, and what does it mean to be conservative? What does it mean to be a Christian, right? And we were grasping for. It's like what you said, right? That tradition, whether it was 1689,
a historic founding.
yeah. And so I would
also
say
zeal.
zeal,
Like, there was
yeah,
a lot of zeal.
yeah, a lot of zeal, and obviously we started a church, and that was a lot of guys. We were hungry for the word. We read the Bible a lot. We read our confessions, and we saw the need of, hey, there's just not a lot of Reformed Baptists in general, honestly, right? Comparatively, so I mean, there's a lot of Baptists, but not very many Reformed Baptists, and so it was a culture of wanting to be rooted in tradition, in the 1689, loving our Bibles, wanting to read it and just gobble up as much theology and we were young guys, so we didn't have a ton of life experience, so we were reading a lot of books, right? So we read a ton of books, and so it was, guys who we had found that rooting in, the 1689, finding, what that meant as we grew up. We had a lot of us had just gotten married. So, I think as we've grown, I think we've kept that, right, that zeal, but it's just become more mature. Obviously, we all have kids now, and things grow.
Now you're trying to apply it to toddlers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I think if you were going to say what was the culture of it, it was just guys on fire for the Lord, for our Bibles, for wanting to learn more, and seeing like things we weren't getting. from a lot of churches, right? Or most churches we could find. And I think that's why we planted the church was like, well, one, it was, we were all moving to a new place and there wasn't, right? You guys were just starting out and, and so there wasn't any Reformed Baptist church that we were aware of, that I was aware of.
There was sort of my old church.
Yeah. So there was,
We don't count.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, there was, probably we just didn't look hard enough, but yeah, that was the culture of it. It was, and I think as time went on, we've matured in that and that's just, I think we've kept it, but also it's just changed over time, just with the nature of things.
Well, and part of it too, I think you'd agree. I mean, since you guys were birthed, part of that came out of the 2020 kind of response to COVID.
Yeah.
I know that our former pastor who planted the church was in law enforcement in San Diego and was anti-tyranny, which I appreciate and respect a lot about him. We talked about backyard weddings. He was the kind of officer that would not report things, which I appreciate. But so I think part of it too. My first impression meeting you guys is one just the evangelistic endeavors. I saw guys from Stone Mountain at like every public event. I'd go to the farmers market. Sean and Lance would be there. I'd run into some guy. Right. Same thing. I meet them at Grace Agenda. They were all over the place. Very active. Very engaged in apologetics, wanting to, be in the public sphere. And that was actually the other thing that really struck me is just being one of those people that were willing in the midst of 2020 to speak out against the tyranny, to kind of follow that lead. A lot of pastors shrunk back in that time. I think it really exposed a lot of weak ecclesiology in a lot of our churches. And so one of the things I respected, about the culture of Stone Mountain when I came to it was just kind of an unapologetic of this is what Scripture demands of us, and this is how we're going to live. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad to know that we're not alone in that, and I'm glad we've been able to develop a relationship with as many young families as we have at our church, and it's growing. We've got a few other people closer to my age now, but definitely still a lot of young families. One of the things that's been a blessing for us is to partner with Truth Family is that we have a lot more diversity that way, and just the opportunity to fellowship with people because generationalism is our goal. Would you agree with that? Like we want to be a church that has 3 generations, 4 generations in the same church, long term, right? Which is I think kind of what you're hoping for in Idaho in general is just to build a generational heritage, hearkening back to your family line.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of getting back to why Idaho. For me, it's personally, right? I talk about, my family's been here, since before Idaho was a state. I call myself an Idahoan, right? I didn't grow up in Idaho. But my, let's put it this way. Like if I hear people talking about Idaho or those kind of things, I guess something I take personally.
Sure.
As funny as that sounds, right, is because, right, I feel like, if I go through Hawaii County, for instance, we're in Hawaii County, right? There's not a time in Hawaii County's history where somebody in my family wasn't here, right, and played a role in this, large land area but small population. That's right, and that's something, right, I try, for my kids, right. I think there's a strength that comes from that, right, having this kind of, personal connection to a place, to the real physical world. Like I feel like, my last name isn't Blackstock, right? My last name is Daggs, and the Daggs family, we have a rich history in the U.S., right? And just like any other family, we moved a lot, right?
Yep.
From the East Coast.
Making your way west.
Yeah,
right?
making our way west, right?
Yep.
And so, but why I resonate so much here is because, in God's providence, there's this ranch that's been preserved. In that ranch, and that, as simple as it is, I don't own it. My cousin owns it, and they run it. But the blessing that's been to, my family, and I think, like I said, I know a lot of cousins on that side that I wouldn't know otherwise. It's because there is a physical, it's a physical manifestation of my great-great-grandfather, right? He was there.
Sure. He walked on that dirt.
Yeah, he built this house, and you go on the concrete, and there's somebody wrote, November, I think it's November 4th, 1902 or something, right? His fingerprints are there, right? And so when I look at the Owyhees, right, I physically say, he started out in the silver mines, and so like when with my kids, I'm like, those are your mountains, right? Those are ours. And so I think there's a strength that comes with that.
Yeah.
And I think as Americans, right, we're a young country and we've been settlers for a long time, right? We've just like any other, my family's been here since the 1600s, and, the Daggs started in Delaware and made their way from there all the way to California, stopping in Virginia and Missouri and all the way along. I think now is a time, especially, to be rooted somewhere. You know, for me, and I think long term, and because I think that's kind of been taken advantage of by the left or liberals, right? And try to say we're a country of immigrants, right? But we're a country of settlers,
settlers
right?
and conquerors.
There was nothing here, right? And we made it what it is, and and we should be proud of that. And we should own that. And
Turns out the Indians weren't good at building things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's why
let's celebrate the child sacrifice that was happening. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when you have, for me, it's like the White counties. I keep going back to that because, right, it's a little blip on the map that doesn't mean much to that many people in the world.
Yeah, most people don't even know the word Hawaii exists. They're like
Hawaii, yeah. And but to me, it's right. It's it's that ranch. It's a lot of the irrigation systems were built by my great grandfather. His son. So that'd be yeah. And then my great grandfather was also a state senator, right? So now it's like, okay, now I'm really like I identify more with Idaho than I grew up in California. Than California, right? And so I want that for my kids, and I think as generations move on, that's how we're going to strengthen, right, our positions, right, and hunkering down. Obviously people move and things happen, but and I think that's something we should.
But you're saying the normative thing, families are made to dwell. And Danny and I have talked about this before in other episodes, but like we were designed, the families were designed to live in proximity to one another, like multiple generations. We're designed to have familial connections, and we're designed to build a heritage in a place. That doesn't mean that the moving is inherently sinful by any means. Like there are times, obviously, I'm from Washington originally, but I've been here. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere. I've been here nearly 20 years now. All my kids are born and raised here. All my kids my oldest son is like, if I don't live in Melbourne until the day I die, I failed. Like I love that about it. And similar to you, like my family has been here since the early 1800s by way of New Jersey and Michigan. I have no connection to New Jersey or Michigan at all. Yeah. They went from New Jersey to Michigan, and then my grandfather was in the Navy and ended up in Washington. That's how my family. So my family was only in Washington for one generation before I moved. So there's not even really much of a history. I know where the family house was in Wenatchee, Washington, where my grandparents raised my family, and it doesn't belong to the family anymore. My aunt lived there until about 15 years ago, and then sold it, and so now it's not in the family. But like I know that family house, but other than that, like I have no connection even to the state of Washington. And so for me, I've been here longer than anywhere. This is the only home my kids have ever known. And it's similar to you. I in many ways have adopted Idaho. Yep. And it's really in my blood to the point where I want our family name to be here for generations. And I think that's something that is normative if we recognize it. Even if we look at the history in the Bible, they were nomadic to a sense, but when they settled, like God set the boundaries of the tribes. Like this is where your family will live. It's something in even the way God has designed the nations that we have to recognize.
I want to build on that more, but we'll come back to it. Yep. One of the things that you began as we moved the conversation in this direction just prompted my background and a major influence on my life was Vodi Bakum. One of the reasons why we are Truth Family Bible Church is because Vodi Bakum planted a church called Grace Family Baptist Church. The family integration and the multi-generational approach to church, which the idea of family integration sounds like it's new and it's novel. It's actually just a designation.
Old paths.
That just points back to the reality. Actually, this is. I don't like that phraseology because it actually just used to be known as church. Yeah. But we actually need to distinguish it now from what has become known as church. And so this old path is identified by a certain element that was included in church, which was multi-generational. So one of the challenges of a church plant that you guys did was the fact of you had so many just young people, and what we want to see, and so it's a fine place to start if you can hold it together, right? But then it's the aspect of how do we then make sure that we actually have this be a multi-generational church, which is something about time, and or adding gray hairs.
Yeah.
Right. So people need to, and that's a challenge because the gray hairs aren't necessarily looking to show up at a young church necessarily. So that's one of the challenges of a church plant. But eventually, as the church grows and as time passes, as people remain and as faithfulness and growing together and building together and commitment is shown, then over time you have a multi-generational church. And that's one of the things that I know you're looking forward to and I'm looking forward to as well. You know, I'm privileged to be able to have my folks in the church and to have, you know, my parents being in their 70s and others as well. I'm always disappointed when the older folks leave. That's not a good thing. I don't like that. We've had that. But to have...
It's because you said what you said about the Constitution.
No. It was long before that. No, it's what I wasn't saying about Israel.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what I wasn't saying.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
But
now
no-
the podcast took a whole
Yeah.
turn. All right.
Okay, but getting it back on track.
Yeah.
It's a privilege. There's something important about my parents and my children, their grandchildren, wanting to sit next to them in church,
Yeah.
and participating and being there together and having a united family experience in church. And there's more people beginning to have that in our church life,
Yep.
and that should be normalized. And I think that's what we really want to see. We want to see, well, even just if you don't have blood relations in your church, one of the multi-generational aspects is the fact that we want our young children, we want lots of babies, we want lots of young children to look up and have relationships with older people, older saints. And for discipleship to happen, you need older, more mature to communicate and to love and to teach the younger, less mature by example, but by also precept in the way in which they communicate. And so all of these things about a multi-generational thing, a vision for church, that also leads to the need for the area of discussion we're kind of getting into is the sense of a commitment and a love for a place and a people, a state in this sense, a locale.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't all have the same heritage like you have, right?
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing, and we'll get more into it. But there is something to, but can it start somewhere? Can it start with me? So let's talk a little bit more about this idea of building a legacy, building long term. Like you said, you've got now family here. You've got, so your folks ended up moving here,
Yep.
and so forth. And you've got cousins and all kinds of other relations in the area. So what does it mean to you as you look into the future with your children? What are you telling yourself? What are you having to do in terms of dreams, commitments, teaching, thoughts about the future? What does that mean for you to get rooted and grounded and to think about multi-generational vision?
Yeah. I think I'm really blessed. Not a lot of people have this now, especially in Idaho, because there's so many. It's most of the people here are new, I think, at this point. But my parents live right down the street, right? I currently rent from my parents, and my kids see my dad like almost every day, and I love that, right? And then looking forward from that, right? To me, it's what it started with in my mind was picking a place. That was easy for me because it was my family was moving here. But
it was the place of your dreams.
Yeah. And it's the sagebrush of southern Idaho, and that was in the Snake River, right? And for me, it was just in my mind saying, "This is where I'm going to be." Come hell or high water. It's really my mindset.
You're committed to
It's
it.
like, hey, this is where I'm going to be. I think now the difficult thing in our current world is there's so many opportunities and they're so easy to go and get elsewhere, no matter where you're at. It doesn't matter if you're in California, LA, right? You're going to hear about opportunities in Washington, D.C. or wherever. And those can be really enticing, and not that that's a bad thing to go and pursue those things. But for me, it was, I'm going to be here. Whatever opportunities I can get here and whatever opportunities I can make, I'm going to make them here. Now, of course, I've, with my family, that affords me more opportunities than your average person. But
Can we hit on that just a little more? I think that's something that's really valuable and important. That is something that we need to think about for the future as well. It's the connection of
Leaving
family.
the inheritance.
Well, kind of, but also just the ability to look out for each other and to help each other. That's what families are meant to do. And so when young people, for instance, just have to figure it out all by themselves, and they start from zero.
It's actually not normal.
There's actually something really nice that your landlord is your parents.
Yeah.
There's actually a blessing in that.
Yeah.
Right?
hmm No, it is, and they rent to me below market rate.
I would
Secondary.
Yeah,
And that's
what I mean.
and that's
Yeah.
necessary in today's economy,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and so
I've had this conversation with my own son.
yeah, and so for me, I've been really blessed by that and seeing that example in my parents, right? And that was something they intentionally did, right? My sister lives down the street from me, and she also lives in a house that my parents own, and she rents from them. And they did that intentionally. They said, "I want you to be near me," and I'm gonna make a way for that to happen, even at economic loss to me, right? That whatever gain I'm missing out on, I'm getting in
Family.
I can every day I'm seeing my grandkids, right? And so that's something for me as seeing that in my
And
parents.
they know where to find the renter if they screw up the property.
Exactly.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it also helps because it's like call my dad, something's wrong. He's like, well, just fix it. Why are you calling me?
You have my permission.
Yeah.
Especially when he burns down the shit.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, unfortunately. Anyway, so for me, that's something I want to grow on, right? So that's an inheritance they're giving me even now, and that's something I want to grow into. Hopefully that means acquiring the land they have now, and so I farm with my dad as well, and growing that in any way we can, and making that a part of when I think about even the house I'm in right now, right? I tell my parents I hope one day I can buy this from you, and I want to buy it from them because my daughter, like she says she wants to live there when she's 4, and she's like I want to live here, and so I can be close to you, right? And it's because that's the kind of that's what I want to build on, right?
Yeah.
And being able to see that and my parents do that for me, and the blessing that is for me, I want to pass that on to them, and that's really right, and that's really the people who have done the best is growing up is the families that were able to keep that inheritance and keep it growing down the line, right? Which is what I heard some Democrat politicians say. Well, they want to just give all their inheritance to their kids without taxes. That's like this terrible thing. Well, that is a terrible thing because there's a strength in having generations of an inheritance, whether that's
a terrible thing for people who hate the country.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it makes stronger communities, and it's less, and it goes into, when people start businesses now, it's, well, I want to employ, whether it's my kids or, another family at church. It's just that interconnectedness. So for me, I've had that played out just with my parents and want that for the future and what that looks in. I think that's going to take shape in different ways for me. I'm only 27. But when I think about my decisions, it's almost always, what am I going to be, what am I doing now that I'm going to leave for them?
You're thinking about how you can bless not only your own family, but like you said just a second ago, other members of the church, which again, this is just, once upon a time, this was just called being a Christian, right? But now it seems radical to be like, oh, I want to create, employment for my fellow brothers in Christ. I want to be able to own land so I can, rent it to young families at a reasonable rate. That's what all Christians should be seeking to do, and that's one of the reasons why we need to advocate against our insane taxation and whatnot. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for even Stone Mountain in general, right? Is having that place for for that generational church-going experience to take place, right? And as those things happen, each family member to me is like a root. Like every cousin I have in a White County to me just grounds me more to the White County, right? Even if I see them all the time or I don't. And the same thing in the church, right? The more Daggs or more people in the church like that, I think just grounds people in that church more. And I think that's why, even my short time when I look at church plants and people leave is because it's not quite built that staying power yet, and it almost has to prove itself. And that's why it's also so hard to get people to leave the Mormon Church or the Catholic Church.
Yep.
Because at least they've been around a long time. There's a power in that.
Yeah.
That is, especially as Protestants, right? We have a lot. It goes by, we're Reformed, and that sounds like a new word, and it sounds like, well, we say the Catholic, in the Apostles' Creed, we believe in the Catholic Church. Well, that's just a name only, right? We had to make a word for what was already existing to take place. So that's and being the first generation is difficult, right? And so, but there's a reward in that, and I think we at church we were talking about this. A lot of the guys, a lot of people just in Idaho in general, it's kind of the Idaho experience. A lot of the first time people coming, so there's a challenge to that. And I think the guys who do the best and is just saying, hey, this is where I'm going to be. This is what I'm going to do. And I think that produces a good amount of fruit for those people.
Well, I think one of the important parts of this whole discussion, this is one of the things that they're challenged with up in Moscow. But when you think about a multi-generational building project, it requires patience, right? It requires commitment and a commitment to being in something for the long haul. But it also requires the ability for our children. Look, not everybody is going to be able to own a farm, right?
Yeah.
Especially now at today's prices and in these situations. If you're just starting out, right, it's very difficult to necessarily be able to get that those sort of things, get the start. But the key aspect is being able to keep our kids. We were talking about that. They have to be able to work and live and support their families in the area if they're going to also develop that commitment and that drive to be with family, near family, to receive the help and the aid that they have by both relational help and also just financial resource help. Because it's not all just money, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm glad my dad got a hedge trimmer for Christmas.
Because now I have a hedge trimmer. Because now I have a hedge trimmer.
I don't want to buy a hedge trimmer.
Yeah.
The things
The
like,
hand-me-down tools
right,
are my favorite part about having a father-in-law.
Yeah.
Right. But also me, like, hey, my dad's leg has been hurting and things like that. But he's like, hey, I need, I'm out of kindling, wood for kindling, or I need some more firewood for heating my house this winter or whatever. And we contribute and we help each other and we do different things like that. But getting back to the issue of for our children, we really have to be thoughtful about Christian businesses. We have to be and being intentional about wanting to train them and employ them and be patient with them and work through that and be looking out for our church family. Look, that's one of the things you mentioned already, the Mormons and Catholics. Like there's something to an identity that says we're united, we're together. The challenge of Protestants in a lot of different ways is our fracturing.
Very sectarian.
The willingness to fracture, the ability. We have a fantastic ability to fight each other and to separate. And we got to get better and that involves commitment to a place. It involves commitment to our families and really being able to build something so that our children are like, I don't have to leave because I have everything I need here. And I want to make a go of it, because it doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. Like to be committed here, you might have to do things you didn't think that you wanted to do, but you do what's necessary, and because you believe that it'll pay off in the long run as you work together, as you've got family, as you build on top of inheritance. Those things are really valuable and important.
Yeah, Christians need to learn to think generationally again. We I was raised, waiting for the rapture any second, and so I think just due to that mindset that's been so pervasive in the church of just expecting the end of the world at any moment, even if we don't really, right? If we're being honest, I think it's encouraged a sense of not wanting to build for the future or think about my grandkids. Like you might think about your kids one generation away, but I don't think a lot of Christians think 2 or 3 generations down the road. Like, what are my grandkids going to think of? I've planted a lot of trees at my house. It was barren wilderness covered in goat heads when I got this. It's an old farmhouse from the 40s. It's a piece of history in Melba, and we're trying to slowly tame it, right? And we planted a bunch of fruit trees, and they're still small. I mean, they're 8 years old. They're still small, right? But my grandkids one day are going to sit under a giant apple tree, and they're going to think, "Thank you, Grandpa, for for planting that." 30 years ago or 50 years ago, and that's the kind of thinking that we need to employ. Because frankly, the odds are stacked against our kids. I mean, that is the number one issue is just affordability of land. So you talk about starting Christian businesses. Also, we need Christians buying land and property and trying to invest in building, make family compounds great again. Like you guys are all right down the street from each other, but like we need to do that. And we've joked at our church, I'm like, we just need to start a town out here in the Owyhees. We'll name it Stone Mountain, Idaho. It'll be the coolest thing ever. I think all the guys think I'm ridiculous, but I'm half serious. I'm like, I want like the bell tower church in the middle of town. We all live a couple miles from each other, and this is our place. That's commendable. That is, I think, what humans are designed to live like, and this is a hot button issue. I was at the Canyon County Republican meeting Tuesday night, and they had the Boise State student body TPSA president there, and he was addressing them, and they were like, what's the number one concern of young Republicans in TPSA at Boise State? And he said the number one thing we want you as our representatives to do is we need affordable housing. All of these young Idahoans can't afford to live in their own state that they grew up in. They're watching their grandparents lose their properties because of whatever housing prices. So it's hot topic. Like we have to do something in our state to fight back against corporations buying our land, foreigners buying our land, and preserving a heritage for our people. And I'm a first generation Idahoan, but Lord willing, 10 generations from now, my family name will be its own town, and that's something that all of us, I think, should aspire to as Christians. And the more generations that are willing to do that, to do the hard work now, the more our offspring 2, 3, 4 generations down the road will benefit from it. We'll become that next institution. We'll become that next stable thing. I say frequently at church that we want to be a church that becomes an institution, that becomes a bulwark in Idaho, that people will know that this church has been here for 100 years. And we don't even have our own building yet, but we're still praying that way now. And part of that starts with an intentionality of wanting to stay and plug in. And so I'm thankful for men like Aaron that's what they want to build.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me as far as mindset was, I think, you say the boomers or that generation, our parents, our grandparents' generation, kind of bought into. I call it like a libertarian capitalism. It felt it's get as much money at any cost, which there's nothing wrong, right? Obviously, we want to make as much money as possible. But
without considering the consequences.
I think for me, is thinking, because now my obviously the money and those things, like you said, that's an inheritance. I think another inheritance, right, is I think it's not disregarding the physical, because we kind of do that now, where it's like there's like that. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm just going to spend all my money until it's gone because it'll ruin my kids if I give it to them." So not disregarding that, but leaving them an inheritance one of a really godly life, right? Sometimes people can think of godly men, and if that godly man was in your line, that just his life is almost like a physical thing, right? Because he was such a good man. So it's whatever you have, whatever you can do, right? For me, it's been my family, whether that's land or things like that, and that'll probably change over time what that looks like. But it's what you have, and thinking, how do I preserve that? That's kind of been more of my thinking is whatever I have, how do I multiply it and then preserve it to the next generation, not just enjoy it all right now. Because I've grown up where it's like I look around me.
Not just cash out.
Yeah, because I've grown up and I look around me, and like the only way I can live where I live is because of the generosity of my parents renting to me below market rate, right? And so that's how my mindset is. Like I grew up in that. So I can see a lot of my friends when they're struggling to buy houses. And so I think that mindset change, and I think a lot of the younger people, right, are feeling that we don't know exactly how to do that, and it's going to be a very, very difficult time to do
start
that.
by getting rid of all the
that would help. There's a lot of things. But it's just thinking, like you said, thinking generationally. And even, I'm like I said, I'm 27. I'm really in that, just grind it out and find what makes so my job by day is to sell shingles, right? I work for a roofing manufacturing company. I never thought I would do that, but it's turned into, a pretty decent job for me. Will I still be doing that 10 years? I don't know, but that came out of where this is where I want to be, and that was what I'm going to do. So just thinking that and being open to that, and with that mindset of wanting to preserve whatever you have, whatever that is.
Well, it's the parable of the talents, right? Like, we've been given to each, if you're given more, you're expected to do more with it. But even if someone has just one measly talent, so to speak, like you said, you can manifest a godly life. You can give an inheritance, even if you haven't got there monetarily yet, right? Not everyone's going to have land to give their family. But eventually, if you start there, you'll get to the point where you do have land to pass down, where you do have a family business to pass down. But it all starts somewhere, and it's just we each need to be faithful with what we're given.
Amen.
No, that's really good. Yeah, anything else that you'd like to bring up or that you'd like to highlight about this sense of appreciation for for Idaho, a place, multi-generational? There's a lot. There's a lot to that, and I appreciate all that you've shared with us. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about your story?
No, just love your people, love your place, and I think in a time of so much movement, trying to find a people that you can really be with and struggle with and grow and build things with. I think those are the guys that are going to win, and those are the communities that are going to do the best. In not just the next 20 years, but the next 500 years. So,
yeah, it's committing with the local church. It's committing with your family and in the place in which you are. Love it, build it, make the most of it. It's going to be. Sometimes it's going to be easier.
Suffer for it
because the easy way is going to be to bail and to seek greener pastures at times. But sometimes it's the slow burn, the daily grind, and the commitments to these things that are really valuable and important for us for the long haul. And we can reap, God willing, multi-generations of faithfulness and fruit that will honor the Lord in this place and a new place. And who knows what it's all going to look like generations down the road. But we start now, and we keep after it. And I appreciate you being with us today, Aaron, but that's all the time that we have for Truth Today. We want to thank you for joining us. And until next time, we hope that you will grow in your love and commitment to Christ and his church as we are sanctified in the truth. God's word is truth.